I guess I'll start with introducing myself. Whit Jones is my name. Just a country boy from eastern North Carolina. Grew up on a farm, wanted to farm. Daddy wouldn't let me farm until I got a degree. And went to NC State, graduated in horse science. Where I'm from, Duplin County, grew up in Duplin County. It is the largest ag county in North Carolina. I got out of school in '82, and if you remember, in the early '80s it was tough farming. Some of my best friends were getting out of farming at the time. So between my junior and senior year, I did an internship with the Extension Service, Cooperative Extension Service, and with a well-known hort agent in a adjoining county that I'd always heard of. And he sold me on the extension. So I got out of NC State in '82 and went with Extension Service. And so I couldn't believe they were paying me to do that. I mean, that was my life, farming, and yet I could go in and treat a man's crop just like it was mine, but didn't have the financial risk. But that's what I did, and a lot of the land in Duplin County was cleared for strawberry production back in the 30s, 40s. We were a large matted row production area, so I've been around strawberries, particularly matted row, for most of my life. The first year I saw strawberries on plastic was the summer of 1981. At that time we were planting the old matted row varieties on it, the Impala, Atlas, Titan, and we had about a 3-week pick season. So they carried them over to the next year to see if they couldn't up the yields to justify the cost of the plastic. And so I went with Extension in '82, and happened that Ron's daddy, Ned Cottle, they had a big field of strawberries right there in Goldsboro, in the main town in Wayne County. So that's where I saw, and he had some carryover Impala, Atlas, Titan on plastic in '82. Well, that fall he took half that field out, laid some new plastic, and planted a variety called Chandler. And when I saw that variety the spring of '83, I said, well, that variety, that's a strawberry on steroids compared to those old matted row varieties. And that's what's kicked off profitability in strawberry plasticulture, was the variety Chandler. And we're still growing Chandler 35 plus years later. You know, and I'll get into some of this as far as looking for new varieties. But Chandler was it. '83, '84, beautiful crops. '85, all of a sudden we started seeing these black spots on the fruit. Had never seen it before, didn't know what it was, where it was coming from, but it was acutatum, anthracnose fruit rot, Colletotrium acutatum. And so it took us a year to figure out, well, it was coming in on the plants we were getting from California. At the time we would get what they called certified purple tag California certified plants. We'd bring them in, plant them out, and grow them out through the summer, and then dig them in the fall and sell them. And it was all a bare root or fresh dug industry at the time. Plugs have really taken off the last 10 years or so, but to start with, it was all fresh dug plants with the leaves, a bare root with the crown and the leaves. And when you set them out, you had to run overhead irrigation for, 10 days, 2 weeks until they stood up and started growing. If those leaves wilted on the plastic, they'd burn up. So as soon as you planted them, you cut your irrigation on, you ran it all day till about 5, 6 o'clock, cut it off. And in the morning, as soon as you started seeing a little wilt, you cut it on, you ran it all day till 5 or 6 o'clock. And after about 5 to 7 days, they'd stand up a little longer. To start with, you might have to cut the irrigation on, say 9:30 in the morning. Then it might be 10:30 after about a week, and then after about 10 days to 2 weeks, they'd stand up on their own. They wouldn't lay on the plastic. They'd kick off and start growing. But that's what the industry started as. It was a fresh dug. Then, like I say, the plugs have caught on. But I've worked with strawberries since '81, '82 on plastic, and when I retired in '09, it was actually Ron's dad that came to the office and said if I retired with Extension, they wanted to hire me, which was 10 years ago now, which, man, time flies when you're having fun and getting old. But I've been with them for 10 years. We've always had over 100 acres of strawberry. We had 115 acres last year. We've cut back to 85 this year. The reason being, we sell to all the major chains on the East Coast, Food Line, Walmart, Harris Teeter, and at the same time we're picking strawberries, they're getting them from California for $4 or $5 a flat. And we're maintaining 12 because they want to stress local. But I've told Ron the last 2 or 3 years that, and they're starting to kick on that $12. I can get them for $4. Why am I paying you 12? And I've stressed with Ron, other than being local, what are they getting for that $12? And it's got to be flavor. And of course, as we know, Chandler does not hold. Chandler tastes good, but the next day or two, it doesn't look very good. It's got no shelf life. And so our main varieties that we grow are Camarosa, Camino Real. They're our workhorses, really. We've got some other varieties, and we've worked with Ruby June now for about 5 years. We started out with a couple of rows, then we went to a half acre, then a couple acres, and this past year we had about 7 acres of them. But it's the best flavored variety out there, and so we're gonna offer these chains a flavor that they can't get from California. In addition to being local, we're going to have the best tasting strawberries out there. I don't think the overall yield it'll yield with a Camarosa. I don't think it will total yield, but I think marketable yield is going to be competitive with our yields we're getting on Camarosa. We've got to have 25,000 pounds per acre. That's what we shoot for, is 25,000 pounds per acre.
What's the plant density?
14 inches, 15,000 plants per acre. We're 14 inches between the plants, foot between the double row, but 15,000 plants per acre. And we use at least 3, if not 4, different planting dates to ensure that we hit the weather right. Because, depending on what kind of weather you get between 1st October and Christmas, can make a lot of difference in the size plants you get and the yields you get in the spring. So we'll usually start around the 5th or 6th October, and then about what I figured our perfect window is somewhere between the 8th and 12th. We'll hit that window. Then we'll hit the next week, and sometimes that 3rd, 4th week of October. I'd rather plant a strawberry a little on the late side and have to use row covers to stimulate that growth and get the plants large enough than to plant too early, particularly a Chandler, and can't stop it from growing if it gets warm right on through Christmas. Because Chandlers tend to load up with 100+ flowers and fruit on it, and they won't size. Not that much of a problem with the other varieties, but Chandler is notorious for getting too big, and by too big I mean too many branch crowns on it. You'll have your main crown, and then you'll have these little side crowns called branch crowns. Ideally, I like 2 to 3 branch crowns, the main crown and 2 to 3 branch crowns on it by Christmas. And it'll put some more crowns on there early spring, there last February, 1st of March, when it starts growing in March. It'll put on a few extra branch crowns on it. But I don't want to go into Christmas with 5 or 6 branch crowns on it, because it's just too big. It'll throw out too many flowers and fruit at one time, and they won't size. And so this year we've gone with 50 acres of Ruby June. We went from 6 or 7 acres, and we've done 50, and we're banking on the chain stores not complaining so much about having to pay $12, and maybe we'll get more than 12 if they can get the flavor. Because this 6 acres that we had of Ruby June this year, we moved that to all our stand, nothing but Ruby June, and we've never had the comments on the flavor of the strawberries. What you don't want is to buy a quart, they taste all right, and they sit in the refrigerator and rot. Go bad, and they throw them out. They'll eat them fast enough to go back and get another one. And so that's what we're banking on with Ruby. It's the first new variety that I've been excited about in a long time. Now, it's going to be important, particularly with new growers and new areas, is to experiment with the different varieties to see how they perform. Because Ruby might do good for us, and it might not do good. I know it doesn't do as good down in Georgia, Alabama. They can't get the yields on it. For us, it's done very well. And like I say, we've grown it increased it every year for the last 5, 6 years since it came out. It is a Lassen Canyon variety. They're charging now $25 $1,000 for royalty. Whereas the public varieties like the Albion came out of UC Davis, it's $9 $1,000. Well, Lassen's going to charge $25. We thought it was 20, but we learned that we're going to have to eat that money. But they want $25 $1,000 as a royalty on this Ruby June. Now, when we saw this Accutatums pop up like 85, 86, Ron Cottle, who owns Cottle Farms, it was ringing the death knell on the strawberries. Nothing would control it. And so Ron went up to Prince Edward Island in Canada to West Tech, which is a tissue culture operation, and we started doing tissue culture to clean these strawberries up. It's isolated, northern part of the island. There's no commercial strawberries around it. And when a strawberry plant comes onto the island, it comes in a test tube, just a meristem tissue, so that it's free of any viruses and diseases. And so we start from tissue culture. It takes us 3 years to come out with a new variety through the tissue culture system. Unlike, it's so easy to just get California plants, plant them out in the spring, grow them out, and tip it or dig fresh dugs in the fall. Easy, quick, but I don't think sustainable, just because of the potential for Accutatum. And the Accutatum doesn't show up in California because it's so dry, but you get it over in our rain and hot and humid climate, and that's when it fires up. Doesn't show itself in Canada. But you bring it down to our area, and if you got it, and you won't know you got it until you plant it and see it. So we've been doing that since 1987. Tissue cultured plants. Never had a documented case of Accutatum coming out of PEI or angular leaf spot. They don't have angular leaf spot either. So that's how we've cleaned it up and are fighting the Accutatum. The easiest way to control Accutatum is don't get it to start with, and so that's what we do. Cottle Farms, in addition to the strawberries, we do about 350 acres of mixed vegetables on black plastic, about 6-8 different varieties of peppers, great tomatoes, big reds, eggplant in the spring, and then after that's done, then we plant a fall crop, cucumbers and squash. We've also got about 25 other growers that grow for us, other vegetable crops, as well as blueberries. I handle the strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, and muscadine grapes. We're now the largest fresh market muscadine grape grower in North Carolina. We've also put muscadine grapes, we got them in Florida. We've sourced them out of Georgia and South Carolina, and 3 years ago put them down in Chile. We sell blueberries out of Chile during the winter. And so we're looking, our spring is their fall, our summer is their winter, so it's exactly the opposite season down there. So we're trying to extend the season on these things. Yes, but I've got a little calendar by month, just a rough outline of things that we watch out for when we're planting and growing strawberries. And I'll kind of go over this right now. May and June, that's when we order our plants in June. Our order forms go out after the growing season, and in June our order forms go out. We want to work the land, get rid of the low spots, because on plastic you got half the surface area to handle that water. You don't want pockets that collect water, and you want a good firm bed when you lay your plastic. Good dome bed, no sagging, where water will collect. Take your soil sample to determine your lime and fertilizer requirements for your planting site.
What pH do you want there?
About 6.2, 6.4, right in that area. I'd rather have my pH a little on the high side and have to spray manganese. When you get your pH above 6.2, 6.3, you'll start tying up manganese. Now, I don't know what the manganese deal is on the clayer soils, but we'll put foliar manganese on if the pH is a little high. And our pH is a little high anyway, because we use poultry litter as our fertilizer for the most part. We use 3 to 4 tons of poultry litter. And of course, that 120 days, you got plenty of time. We put that poultry litter out in August, and by the time we pick a strawberry, that 120-day deal is done as far as bacteria concerns. And so we use 3 to 4 tons of poultry litter. As far as the fertilizer goes, you want about 60 pounds of nitrogen before you lay the plastic. 60 pounds of nitrogen, and your potassium. If with no soil sample, I always recommend at least 120 pounds of potassium. And that's another area that I don't like to use any murate of potash, 0060 or potassium chloride on any fruit or vegetable. And I always recommend 6618 or 6318 tobacco fertilizer. And you'll never find chlorine in a tobacco fertilizer because it makes tobacco hold so much water it won't cure. Well, in produce, it makes produce hold so much water it won't hold. And with the plastic, you're trapping all that chlorine. At least on tobacco, some of it will gas off, but it'll still make that tobacco hold so much water it won't cure. So I like a sulfate source of potassium, 0050 or 0022 K-mag or sulfomag. 0050 is sulfate of potash. And sulfur, I'm putting 40 and 50 pounds of sulfur per acre on our strawberries, and when I pull tissue samples in March when they start growing, I'm still showing short sulfur. And so I don't think people are putting enough sulfur, and that sulfur improves the flavor of those strawberries. And that's why we start feeding Epsom salt when we start picking.
So would a sulfur well be good to water them with?
Do what now?
A sulfur well, would it be good to water them with?
A sulfur well, when you're watering the sulfur water, it wouldn't hurt. I don't know if you'll get enough sulfur, but you need the sulfur, and I'm recommending at least 30 to 40 pounds of sulfur per acre, and I'm putting 40 to 50 and still showing short sulfur when I do the tissue in the spring. And I also like to put down a pound of actual boron before I lay the plastic. So in general, about 60 pounds of nitrogen, 120 to 150 pounds of potassium, and a pound of boron with the sulfur in the sulfate of potash. And you'll find murate or 0060 in most fertilizers because it's the cheapest source of potassium. Potassium chloride, murate, 0060, that's the cheapest source of potassium, and that's why they put it in most fertilizers. Sulfate source is more expensive. But back home, 6618 tobacco fertilizer, you'll never find the chlorine in that tobacco fertilizer. And even though your soil samples are not calling for any phosphorus, I like at least 30 to 40 pounds of phosphorus in the fertilizer before you lay the plastic. Because as you know, if you plant corn, you know what corn looks like when it turns cold. And you don't have any starter by it, turn purple, because it's tying up phosphorus. Well, these strawberries are growing and it's cold. And so I like 30, 40 pounds of phosphorus, even though that index is so high they don't call for any. I still like 30, 40 pounds of phosphorus down before I put the plastic down and plant these strawberries, because they're growing in a cold time of the year when you'll tie that phosphorus up. And if you've ever planted corn and not putting your starter, you'll see that if it gets cold spring, that purple.
You did say that's per acre, right?
Yes, all this will be per acre. Mm-hmm. All right, so in July and August, we got our lime out, we got our fertilizer, and then August and September, that's when we pull our beds and lay the plastic. If you gas, most of the gas we're using now is a C60 chlorpickrin. You've got some, Danny's got an alternative over here if you don't do the gas. But if you gas, you got to allow 3 weeks between gassing and setting your plants to allow that gas to get out. Now still, even at 3 weeks, I like to punch those holes a few days before I set, just so that all that gas is out of there. I won't say easier, but it covers your ground with nematodes and the telone. A C60 is 60% chlorpickrin and 40% telone. Telone for the nematodes, the chlorpickrin for your soil diseases. Phytophthora, Fusarium, and Alan Straw put it the best I've heard. Without you got root nibblers. That's the way he called it. Root nibblers like Fusarium, Rhizoctonia, that the plants won't express symptoms of it, but it holds it back. It's feeding on the roots enough to where it's not growing as vigorously as it should. But visually, you can't see it, but it's nibbling on those roots enough to where it's holding it back, and that gas just kind of cleans all that up. And so that's why we gas nematodes and soil-borne diseases. I mean, most of our growers are small, 1 acre, 2 acre growers, and they're on a good location on the road. Don't put them on the road. You want them on the road so people can see them. And they've got limited space, so they'll put them on the same spot year after year after year. And so yes, that's exactly why the small guys do it. But we gas all our land, produce, all the vegetable crop land, strawberry land. It gets gassed just to clean it up. I've never seen a crop that did not respond to gas. I've never seen a crop that did not respond to gas.
What's the cost per acre?
You're probably looking at $600-700 an acre. In strawberries, you'll have about $15,000 an acre in it by the time you get ready to pick strawberries. Counting your irrigation setup, and your plastic, and your gas, and your plants. It's an expensive crop per acre to grow, and it's expensive enough you can't afford to crash and burn with it more than a year or two. So doing everything right, all the links of the chain need to be there, but the profit potential per acre is more than any crop that I know of. I mean, depending on where you're at and what you're selling them for. For us, it's not that. We make our money in the stands. I mean, when you're getting $1.50 a pound, and that's what we're selling in the grocery stores, 8-pound flat, 8 1-pounders for $12, versus $3.50 or more a pound when you're selling straight to the public. And some folks are getting a lot more than that. So the profitability depends on what you're selling them for, and that varies by areas that you're at. I know up in Virginia Beach, they're getting fancy prices. Texas, they're getting prices I've never heard of. The profitability depends on your market. And so, and the yields, your profitable yields depends on your market. I mean, I can live with a pound per plant like that any day. But profit-wise, strawberries, if you can sell them and you can retail them, it's the most profitable crop per acre just about you can grow. That's legal. And okay. When you lay your plastic, that's when you want to, before you punch your holes, that's when you want to sow your ryegrass. And that rye we use just to stabilize the soil. If you got bare soil over the winter and you get a lot of rain and you get any slope, you'll wash that dirt off the edges of the plastic and tend to blow up. So we use the ryegrass, not necessarily for mulch during pick season, but to stabilize that soil during the winter so that the rains don't wash that dirt off the edges. When the rye starts getting above the plastic, that's when we'll knock it back with post. Some folks use a half rate to kind of stun it up, but and when you use post, don't use the oil with it. It's just post with no surfactant, no oil.
Can you go ahead and spray that now?
Yes, yes you can.
Why don't you use surfactants or oil?
It'll tend to burn the strawberry leaves. And especially if you wait till February to do it, if you seed it late and you don't get the growth on it, you spray it when the strawberries are starting to grow and flower. You don't want that oil on the flowers. It'll affect the pollination. All right, September, October, you want to install the irrigation main lines and connect up your drip lines. You want to turn on the irrigation to saturate the beds and plant the strawberry plugs. One thing you don't want to do with a drip is overwater at one time. When you cut that drip on, after about an hour, most of that water moving down instead of over. And what you're doing after about an hour and a half, you're blowing your fertilizer out of the bed. It's leaching the fertilizer. So what I like to do, run it about an hour and a half and cut it off for 3 or 4 hours. Cut it back on, run it for about an hour. That'll help pulse it over to the shoulders instead of moving it down out of the root zone. Your fertilizer I'm talking about. But to wet that bed, pulse it. Hour and a half, no more. On our soil, I don't want to run it more than an hour and a half, because then you start wetting a foot deep, and it's just going deeper, and it's taking your fertilizer with it. So run it about an hour and a half, cut it off, 2 or 3 hours, cut it back on for an hour, cut it off until you get the shoulders. The best thing I've found to check the moisture in a plastic bed is a soil probe that you take a soil sample with. Just stick it in there and see how deep the waterfront's moving and where it's at. Just probe it, pull that plug of dirt, soil out, and see where that moisture is. That's one of the best things I've seen. And it's going to vary early in the season. You don't need the water that you do when it's when it's later in the season. The plants are bigger, it's loaded up with fruit. So you have to adjust your water. Doesn't take near as much, say late February, 1st of March when you just start to grow, as it does in May, late April, May, when it's hot. The plants are big, they're loaded with fruit, they're using more water. So it might take longer to wet that bed. But you don't want to overwater when you're picking. Too much water will dilute the sugar, just like it does a watermelon or any fruit. If you got too much water during pick season, it'll tend to dilute the sugars. So don't overwater. All right. Don't run it more than an hour and a half. Overhead irrigation is beneficial but not required for plugs. I like to run overhead when I'm planting plugs just for 2 or 3 days. 3 or 4 hours the first day, a couple hours the next day, maybe an hour the third day, just kind of settle that soil in and cool it off. But just to kind of settle that dirt, soil, and it's not dirt, it's soil, around the roots. Or time it ahead of a rain if you can, if you're lucky enough. But it's not required. You can water them in with trickle, and a lot of folks do. But if you got overhead, it'll help get them off to a better start. Plus, if it's real hot, you can run it just a little bit to kind of cool it off a little bit. Okay, once you've got them set, after 2 to 3 weeks, I like to inject Riddle-Mill. Once they get some active roots, Riddle-Mill's systemic, the roots take it up. So after 2 or 3 weeks, when they start cutting some new roots, go ahead and inject. The rate is 1 pint per acre, but you're only treating about half an acre. Some folks will still put the full pint, won't hurt, but half a pint to 2/3 of a pint is a plenty per acre for Phytophthora root rot, which is really important when you start putting strawberries behind strawberries behind strawberries. Because once you get some Phytophthora, it'll be there for years. So, Pro-Phyte, K-Phyte, or a couple of other products that you can run. Alliette, you can use, we spray, if we see Phytophthora during the growing season, it's got a 0-day wait on it. You can foliar apply that Alliette and the leaves take it up and it's systemic through the leaves as well. The Pro-Phyte, K-Phyte, or Alliette, they're all phosphites that work on Phytophthora. And October, November, we want to, any overhead systems, you want to drain the lines, filters, pumps, make sure they don't freeze. November, December, if you're using row covers for winter protection, they should be in place by late November, early December, just for winter protection. Or if you planted late, you can use these row covers to increase growth on them. We were kind of talking earlier, but I'd rather plant a little on the late side and have to use row covers to speed them up than to plant too early and they start growing, you can't stop them, especially a Chandler. Matter of fact, around home, I don't even recommend them covering Chandler because it'll grow, it'll make up for lost time better than any variety I've seen. Matter of fact, it'll make it up so good it'll overload and won't size the fruit. But getting your row covers out, keeping them covered. Strawberries, the biggest problem I've seen for winter injury is when you get 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of real warm weather, 60, 70, and then bam, you're in the low teens. That's when you want to get covered up. When you've got 2, 3 weeks of good warm weather, and then all of a sudden it's going to drop into the teens. That's when I like to cover during that cold weather, and when it warms up, take the covers back off. Spider mites are the number one problem that I see with row covers because it creates a good warm environment under there. Especially if you grow other crops that spider mites come, cantaloupes, watermelon, spider mites love, eggplants, spider mites love. But we always check for spider mites. As a matter of fact, sometimes we go ahead and spray and then cover. But go out, scout the field, depending on the history of spider mites on your farm. But go out and check for spider mites, and if you don't have one of these 10X lenses right here, there's no way you'll see those spider mites and the eggs. It's a 10X hand lens. You got to put it right up to your eye and then bring that leaf up and check them. Well, with these hand lenses, you can see the adults as well as the eggs. But anybody growing strawberries needs one of these right here for spider mites. It stays in my pocket through the strawberry season. But if you see any other like leaf spots, again, if you've got a plant source that you've seen the possibility of anthracnose, captan or thiram. I like captan a little better on anthracnose, but if your plant source has a potential for Colototrium macutatum or fruit rot anthracnose, that's when I'd put a couple of applications of captan in the fall. But that's just whatever your risk is of anthracnose. Again, like I said, out of PEI, we've never, since '87, never had a documented case of acutatum. All right. December, February, we want to continue scouting the fields. Uncover the strawberry during the warm periods, but be ready to deploy them when you've got the low temperatures coming, especially preceded by some warm weather. February, uncover the strawberry to kill the ryegrass, and that's when we ordinarily do it. And like I say, it's very important not to use the oil in there with the post. Clean up the strawberry leaves, the dead leaves that are not over winter. Clean them up, pull weeds while you're doing it, and and pull any strawberries that you're growing up under the plastic, pull them out. And that's right in that area, that late February, 1st of March, when they start growing. That's when you want to time that roverall spray. I've got the roverall under March to May, but just as soon as the plants start to grow, you want to spray the roverall. And then once they start growing, that's when you want to start injecting your fertilizer. 6 to 7 pounds of nitrogen per week. And I like 12 to 14 pounds of, I like a 1-2 ratio of nitrogen potassium. If you just feed nitrogen, you'll tend to wind up with soft fruit if you don't have enough potassium. You can live with higher nitrogen levels if you've got enough potassium. But to prevent that soft fruit, when you pick those strawberries and your hands turn red, that fruit's too soft. And it's usually an indication of too much nitrogen. So, so I like a 408. That's what we use, 408. It's got 0.4 pounds of nitrogen per gallon and 0.8 pounds of potassium per gallon. And we use equivalent of about 6 to 7 pounds of nitrogen, 12 to 14 pounds of potassium, depending on the variety. Something like a Chandler needs that 7 pounds of nitrogen, 14 pounds of potassium. Camarosa, not as much, but more in that 6 and 12 range. Okay, and what I like to do after I make that first fertilizer application, that's when I like to pull the first tissue sample. Have you ever pulled tissue samples on strawberries, seen what the fertility is actually in the foliage? You got to you pull the leaf and the petiole, and you separate the petiole and the leaf and send it both off, and they'll sample the petiole as well as the leaf tissue for your nutrient levels in the tissue. And that's when you'll adjust your fertilizer program according to those tissue samples. And you'll take those. I like to take those tissue samples periodically through the season, every 3 weeks or so, 2-3 weeks. Okay. Pull the tissue samples, adjust your fertilizer. Test your overhead system if you use that for frost freeze protection. How many use overhead irrigation for frost freeze? Okay, all right. The principle behind that is as water goes from a liquid to a solid, it gives off heat. And as long as you can keep that system continually going from a liquid water to ice, liquid to solid, it'll keep it at 32 degrees because it gives off heat as it changes state from a liquid to a solid. But if you cut it off, if for any reason it gets cut off, you'll go from a solid to a gas, and it takes heat away, evaporative cooling, and you'll actually get colder than it was if you'd have done nothing. So it's important, and cut on time is very important. It depends on the dew point. You know, if you got a dew point, say 10 degrees, you won't get dew formation or frost until you get 10 degrees. But the way we always judge it, of course we got a thermometer, but the lower the dew point, the quicker cut on, because when you initially cut that water on, it cools everything down. That shock, it'll initially cool things down before it brings it to 32 degrees and then starts forming ice. So, and the drier it is, the more evaporation you get before you start getting that ice formation, and you can get that temporary drop below freezing before you get that ice start forming. So the drier the air, the quicker you need to cut it on. Cut it on. Don't wait till it starts getting to 32 to cut it on. You cut it on somewhere between 34 and 36 degrees. We always test the cab, top of the cab of the truck. That metal's always colder. When we start feeling a little frost on that cab, not the hood, but the top of the cab, we cut our water on, because it's always going to form there before it forms on the canopy of the plants. But we've gone to using nothing but row covers for frost freeze protection. For the food safety issue, and I'll show you some slides here why. To get we got so much acreage, there's no way a whale can cover that many acres, so we have to come out with a pond for frost freeze. And we did this up until about 3-4 years ago. We got strictly row covers, but we always did overhead. But the food safety guy, we're all GAP certified. To sell these chains, you got to be GAP. We're global GAP certified, the fields and the packing house. And what they don't like to see is your pond got 30 geese out there on the pond, and you're sitting there running that water over fruit that's ready to pick, you know, for the bacteria problem. And we sell to all the chains, and so we've gone strictly to row cover for frost freeze protection. And it's a whole lot, you sleep a whole lot easier when you know they're covered up and you got those marginal nights, 30 degrees, 32 degrees with a chance of frost. And with the covers, you can sleep on. You don't have to go cut the water on. So the row cover is a lot of advantage using row covers for frost freeze. And I've seen when you get cold enough, both, but we've had pretty good protection. We've double covered for frost freeze to keep from having to use overhead water. And I'll show you some of that coming up. About a week or so before we start picking, we start injecting Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate. And with that tissue sample, it's told me whether I'm short on sulfur, I might go to 20 pounds, 15 pounds per acre, 20 pounds if I'm short sulfur, which I have been about every time I pull tissue. But it makes those berries sweeter with that Epsom salt, 10 pounds per acre per week, right on through pick season. And what you don't want to do is put it in there at the same time you do your 408. 408 is made with a combination of potassium nitrate, 13045, and calcium nitrate. And Epsom salt will not mix with calcium nitrate. So you want to do the 408, flush your lines, and of course, when you inject your fertilizer in the drip system, you always crank your drip system up, get it fully charged, take 10 or 15 minutes, get it fully charged, then you do your injection. And once you make your injection, you run it another 10 or 15 minutes to flush the lines. But you want it fully charged before you inject. If you don't, you're going to put more out front of the row than you will at the end of the row. And then the next day, do your Epsom salt. Don't do it. You want to make sure all that 408 is out of the lines before you put the Epsom salts in there, or you'll get sediment. It'll filter out and it'll stop your drippers up. But that Epsom salt is very important weekly to increase the flavor of the fruit.
How long do you like to inject? Do you like to take?
I don't like to irrigate more than an hour and a half. We got to use electric pony pumps. It'll get it out there in about 15 minutes. And so I'll cut it on for 15 minutes, inject, then I'll just run it to complete the cycle and flush it all out. But like I say, I never like to run that system more than an hour and a half at one time, especially early in the season. You might want to, you can get by with it Later in the season when those plants are large, it's hot and they're using a lot of water. As a rule of thumb, I never like to run it more than an hour and a half just because your fertilizer going below the root zone. But yeah, a siphoning device takes longer, and that's why I don't like that. But a little electric blown it. We mix it up in a small grower, mix it up in a pickle barrel with about 25 gallons of water, your 10-pound Epsom salt, and just inject it right into the lines. Ahead of the filter. You want that filtered too. No sediment. That water that's going through those trickle lines need to be cleaner than the water you drink. And that's why you need the filters. Even well water, I like a disc filter. If you're coming surface water, you need a media filter with sand.
City water.
I'd run it through a disc filter. I'd still run it through a disc filter before it goes into those trickle lines. I've seen some nasty city water too. But yeah, filter that water before it goes through the trickle lines. And like I say, if you got city water, well water, a screen filter, disc filter, but I still filter it before it got out. I say it needs to be cleaner than what you drink. Again, you put your half a pint of Riddle before, 2 to 3 weeks after you set. When they start growing in spring, I like another half pint of Riddle. And when they start growing, you put your 1 pound of boron out before you laid the plastic in the fertilizer. I like a foliar application of boron. When they start growing, you got some blooms out there. I like a 1/4 pound of actual boron foliar applied. That's quick, it's there, and then a couple weeks later you can inject some. So a pound during the peak season is not too much boron. But you don't want any more than a 1/4 pound of actual boron as a foliar. If you do more than that, you'll wrinkle those leaves. But a 1/4 pound, which is a quart of a 10% boron, is a 1/4 pound of actual boron, but no more than a quart as a foliar application per acre. Like I say, that helps pollination. The boron will help that pollination. And around home, I've seen a lot of boron deficiency. They don't put the boron, they wind up with old cat face looking fruit. And a lot of times they think, well, the bees just didn't pollinate. Well, a lot of times it's boron deficiency. You'll see that cat face fruit. And that's why I like the pound of boron when you lay the plastic, and then when they start growing and they flush out the flowers, put a 1/4 pound foliar, and you can put a quart or two through the trickle system 2 or 3 weeks later, to finish it out. And a tissue sample will tell you your levels of boron, what you need. Although I think in North Carolina, the level of boron they say you need, I think we need to be higher than what they recommend on the boron.
You want the foliar boron before you put the trickle. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, when they flush out and they really start growing in the spring, I like a 1/4 pound on the foliage. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, you can put another quart, depending on the tissue. That first application, I like that 1/4 pound of actual boron on the foliage. It's there. Got our Epsom salt. It's common to see deficient sulfur, boron, and iron. we commonly show short in the tissue on iron. And of course, I'm using a product on everything I grow called Iron Man. It's got a little urea along with the iron. The urea aids that plant to absorb the iron. But the iron, just take that tissue and see what you're short on. But a foliar application of iron if you need it. Okay, don't mix the Epsom salt with the calcium nitrate. Okay, after you get through all the frost-free protection, make sure you cover it good and dry, roll them up, and put them in a good dry spot for next year. All right, in June, remove the overhead irrigation, disconnect all the drip lines, finish harvesting and kill the plants to prepare for double cropping the beds or removing the plastic and plant a summer cover on it. Roundup won't kill those strawberry plants. I don't know if you've ever tried to kill them with Roundup. Roundup won't kill them. But it will kill the grass and weeds. And so what we do, we follow our strawberry crop with cantaloupes. And so we'll spray, while the strawberries, we spray right over top of strawberries Roundup to kill the grass and weeds really. And then wait a week, and then we come in and we twist those plants off and plant cantaloupes on the beds. You don't want to twist those plants off and then spray Roundup to kill the grass and weeds, because then you get Roundup on the bed. When those cantaloupes run on those beds, they'll absorb that Roundup that's on that plastic and stunt the crap out of them. So before you do anything, when you're finished with the strawberries, spray over the top with the Roundup to kill the grass and weeds. It's not going to kill the strawberries. And then a week later, twist them off. If you're going to double crop, you can mow them good and close. If you can get a good close mow with a mower, you can mow them off and to get your plastic up. But if you just mow them off and plant a double crop, a lot of times those strawberries will come back. So that's what we do. We'll spray over the top with Roundup, then we'll go through and get the labor and twist them off, throw them in the middles, and plant the cantaloupe. Okay, well that's just a kind of a rough outline, just things, and we'll adjust this, particularly with our sprays. Our very first spray, like I say, we've got some other plant sources like Fronteris that we've got from another plant source. And when we try some other varieties from California, we've got a special program that we spray for acutatum, Colototrium acutatum. At all our PEI plants, we're basically concerned with botrytis and spider mites, of course. But that's we'll start spraying. Our early sprays are with Captan, but Captan whitewashes. You know, you don't want to use Captan during the pick season because it'll whitewash those strawberries. You see that white residue on them. So that's when we switch off to Switch. I like Switch and I like Elevate. And now in the chart you'll see there's pretty widespread resistance, botrytis resistance to Elevate. Not seen that from PEI plants. Other nurseries, and I don't like to talk about the competition, but some of the nurseries actually crop some of the day neutral varieties, and they've got other Matty Row production around them, and they have got resistance. And Guido down in South Carolina would test for your resistance. And for 2 years, I took samples from other plant sources and ours and sent them to Guido. Ours showed very little resistance. They're all resistant. Thompson M doesn't work at all on botrytis anywhere. But our plants showed no resistance problem with Elevate. But Switch, Elevate, we use Kenja in our rotation for gray mold or botrytis. And if anthracnose was a problem, you know, your bedrock material for anthracnose is Captan or your strobilurins like Cabrio, Pristine, but even acutatum is showing resistance to that as well. So like I said, the best way to keep away from acutatum is clean plants. But with a threat, and if you've got a threat of anthracnose, don't go through in February cleaning them up, because you'll just spread it. Just depend on your Roverall and your botrytis sprays to control gray mold or botrytis. Because botrytis comes in on that dead tissue, those old leaves that are brown that didn't make it through the winter, the old flowers, the early flowers that get killed. Botrytis loves that stuff, you know. So it's really important that first spray, that Roverall, and then come in with your Captan sprays. And like I say, if you've got acutatum, you know, you rotate between Captan, your strobilurin, and we on our fields we'll use Captan and Thompson M. Thompson M's got activity on anthracnose. No activity for botrytis, but it does have activity on anthracnose, the Thompson M. But we'll mix the Thompson M with the Captan. The weakest link I've seen on most strawberry fields is their sprayer. We use high pressure. Now you can get by early season and lower pressures, and we got a lot of tobacco farmers back home. High pressure to them is 60 pounds of pressure. That's high pressure to a tobacco farmer. Well, in produce, we're talking 300 pounds. I like high pressure and coverage. To get coverage, it's pressure and volume. More water, higher pressures. And our nozzle arrangement is a nozzle over the top and one on each side. It's got drops that come in from the side and over the top. And you won't see those leaves do that number when you go by and spray them. Complete coverage. Real important, especially when you canopy up. You know, when you got a hedgerow of plants out there and that inside can't dry out, you better be getting some fungicide in that inside. And that takes pressure. And like I say, at the pump, we'll run 300. When we open up all the nozzle, we spray 7 rows at a time. We're running about 250 at the nozzle. But like I say, when you see those leaves, just do that number. When you go over them, you know you're getting coverage. But that's the secret with a fungicide and disease control is coverage. And you get that with pressure and volume. We use about 75 gallons of water per acre when we canopied up. You can get by with less pressure and less volume when they're small this time of year, or the first spray or two. But when they canopy up, you got a full canopy, you got a hedgerow of plants, you got to have some pressure and volume to get in there.
Y'all have any questions for Whit? I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge here, and we appreciate him coming this far. So ask some questions about production. Then we're going to get into row cover management, and he'll show some pictures of the farms, the actual farm, and some of their plants there in North Carolina. So any questions about production?
One thing I would like to mention, strawberries don't like to get wet when you're picking. when they're calling for rain, you need to get out the day before and pick them close. The green berries would take that water a whole lot better than a ripe berry. So when they're calling for rain, you get out there and you pick them close. You don't leave anything out there ripe that's going to get wet. So that's the best way to combat water, is just try to get right ahead of that rain. You pick them as close as you can. Don't leave any ripe stuff out there to get wet.
And all these fungicides, you switch them up from
Yes.
year to year.
As long as you're in that rotation during the season.
Switch pristine, Kansas.
Elevate. Mm-hmm.
Where you get 300?
Diaphragm pump.
Okay.
You can get it with a piston diaphragm. We use a diaphragm, Hypro D50 diaphragm pump. You can just change that diaphragm out there, easy to maintain. And high pressure hoses and stainless steel to ceramic nozzles. Brass burns out, especially when you get wettable powders. It'll burn, plastic isn't, you burn them out one spray, but like stainless steel nozzles or ceramic, we use stainless. But high pressure hose, it doesn't take that much to get rigged up to do high pressure. All right. Our 100 acres is split up in about 6 different fields. This happens to be about a 30-acre field right here. This is March of 17. I don't know how cold y'all got, but this is March the 17th right here. We had just come through 3 days, actually 5 days of freezing weather. 3 days before this, we had 35-mile-an-hour winds, and it got down to low 20s. And we had 1 acre that we did not cover and tried to protect with water. We ended up stripping it. We couldn't protect it in that wind. Overhead water for frost freeze, if the wind gets above 7, 8, 10 miles an hour, you just can't. The water blows back on that sprinkler head and freezes it up. It'll just sit there in one spot. But we double covered. This is how we take it off. We bunch it up in the middle. Our covers cover 9 rows. And we'll bunch it up, and then we'll just walk it out of the field. At the end of the row, we got a spool mounted and it running about a PTO. It'll roll it up, but we still got to assist it, and we roll it up on a spool. The roll will be about that big around as we roll it up on a spool, and then we take that to the packing house and store it in a good dry spot. But we just came through the previous 2 mornings were 19 degrees both mornings. We waited about 10:30, it got above freezing. We started walking these covers out. That was the first cover. Then this is the second cover we're taking off. That's Ron right here. And came through in flying colors. After lunch, we started picking. That's March the 17th, just coming out of freezing weather. If we could have protected it with water, we would have lost this fruit Beautiful fruit. Because it's too ripe, it couldn't have took the water. It could not have taken the water, this ripe fruit. So we would have lost all that. We paid for those row covers right there. Right there. This is Camarosa that we started picking. That's our crew leader, one of our crew leaders. That's the 20th, 3 days later. That's Albion. That's Albion. And but we would have lost every bit of that fruit. If we could have protected it with water, that fruit would have been trashed because it just couldn't have taken that much water for frost freeze. That's why I like row covers. There's our there's our net rock bags that we use to cover strawberries with. They weigh about 8 pounds. Tag that you hold, you don't grab it by that net. That net will tear, but it's got a tag on it that you grab it by. We haul them, that's our cantaloupe trailer, but we take the rock bags to the field like that. Put the rock bags out first. Like I say, our covers cover 9 rows, and where the ends come, we go ahead and put our rock bags out before we put the covers out there. Here we are getting set up. There's our rolls of covers that we rolled up last year. This happens to be about a month ago. This is Albion that we planted September the 7th. We're trying to get a fall crop, doing a fall crop of Albion. You know, they're $20 a flat right now. That's what we're getting for them right now. We picked them about 4 times already. But this is a challenge that we're trying to do. I tried growing our own tips in the greenhouse, and in December, I took 5-gallon nursery containers. I planted 5 plants in each one filled with pine bark. Grew them out in the greenhouse, and we pulled tips in May, June, July, plugged them, grew the plugs, set them out. They didn't bloom. Our days are not long enough. You know, if Prince Edward Island doesn't get dark till 11 o'clock at night, and it takes those long days. And folks call Albion a day neutral. It's actually a long day. You know, all the strawberries we're growing are called short day varieties. That short day length in the spring, they initiate flowers and bloom. Albion, they have always called a day neutral. It'll bloom, it'll bear in the long days, the fall. But here, this is about a month ago when we danger frost. We covered them up. We're walking them out, and we walk it out down the middle of the aisle. We walk it out down the middle and then spread it both ways. We cover 9 rows, about the 4th, 5th middle. We walk it out and then we spread it out. And as you see, ours are a little closer because we got big fields and the wind just comes up, and we'd rather be safe than sorry because we have had covers wind up in the woods, decorating the woods on the edge of the field. There we got and then that's the way it looks. And of course, not all the covers you see it where it's doubled up right there, where the shorter covers, we just roll it out. We don't cut it, we just roll it, and where it stops, it's just doubled up in places where one cover stops and the other one starts. We use a 1.2 ounce. 1.5 ounce, you get more shading. They got a new cover out that they use a white lubricant on these covers during the processing stage, and it gets that white color. Saw some down at the expo back in November. The guy, AgriFact, was right beside, and he was showing me some of the clear cover that they use out in California for plant production, and it doesn't have that white color. More light penetrates through it. The 1.5 ounce covers, you get too much shading. So the 1.2, you don't get the shading you do with the 1.5, and the 0.9, they don't last as long. So we think the best trade-off is using the 1.2s. They last longer than the 0.9s and don't have the shading that the 1.5s have.
You have 2 or 3 cold nights in a row, you'd be uncovered between during the daytime.
Just leave them on. When it warms up, then uncover.
Do you have anything out in the field to keep your covers up out of the mud and the water? So
No.
they're not as sopping way up?
No, we just don't pull them real tight so they don't mash when they float. Matter of fact, on a good windy day, it's like this. This is our sprayer. As you notice, it's got the drops. I got a pointer on this thing. It's got the drop on each side of the row, along with that nozzle right over the top. And this, like I say, this is Albion. We planted it September the 7th, and we're picking it. You can see the pickers out there picking. We got the sprayer ready to start spraying as soon as they're done picking, because we're expecting frost the next night. So as soon as they finish picking, we're spraying for spider mites, and that's what we're spraying for here, is spider mites, before we cover them. And that field picture should have been before you saw the row covers out. But we're picking them, and we're going to spray them, then we're putting the row covers on. Well, like I say, spider mites is one of our main problems. Just because we keep stuff in the field, from cantaloupes to the eggplant, spider mites, we keep spider mites out here in the field. And we spotted them. Albion will get a spider mite before anything else will. And so we saw them with the glass. We knew they were out there. So as soon as we finished picking, we're spraying and we're covered. That's a bucket of Albion that we picked before, we saw the pickers out there. That's a bucket of the Albion. And a fall-grown Albion, it'll brick 11 or 12. Most of your spring strawberries, if they brick 7 or 8, that's a sweet strawberry. But Albion picked in the fall, when it's cool, warm days, cool nights, and the sugar levels just go sky high.
And you said that the crop was set
September the 7th.
September the 7th.
Yes.
And you picked when?
We started picking middle October. And we grew these plants at Prince Edward Island. She grew the plugs out at Prince Edward Island when they had those long days. And whereas when we would get the tips, bring them to face and grow them out, about 40% of the plants would not flower, even the tips grown at PEI. Well, we found that 90% of the plants that she grew out bloomed and flowered. So there's got to be something to that long days on this day neutral or long day variety. They call it day neutral, but it's actually a long day variety. And the size is increasing. As you see, those plants aren't that large. But the bigger, and as the plants get bigger, the size is getting better. Every pick we make, the size is getting bigger.
How long will you pick those berries there?
We picked last year up till day before Christmas. And then we uncover them, let them rest. Now, we will cover these up quicker than the others because they're tender. They're not as hardened off as our Camarosa or Osage, the other ones. But these we will cover if it's calling for real cold weather, but uncover them when it warms up. And this is about a 6-acre field of these. Like I say, this is an experiment trying to see what we can do with a fall crop. And with an Albion, if you plant Albion the same time you do a Chandler, Albion will make about 2/3 of a crop. Because what it wants to do, it wants to flower and fruit instead of build plant. And you won't have as big a plant going into the spring. But if you plant it 4 to 6 weeks earlier, it'll yield with any variety. But now it will not take water. A ripe Albion, when it rains, it'll suck the water up just like a straw. But eating-wise, it's a very good flavored variety. 3 years ago was the first year we had a good spring crop of these, and we sent some to Harris Teeter. Only time we've had a chain call wanting to know what variety of strawberry we had sent them that week before. Said the customers were raving over it. It was Albion. Usually when they call, it's a problem. This time they call wanting to know what it was, and wanted more of them. And that's why we're trying to sell flavor now, Okay, that was that March 17th when we started picking the Camarosa. Side of an apple is 116 gram strawberry right there. I've wanted to do this for 30 years, is look for other varieties. I tell them we come out with muscadine grape varieties quicker than we come out with strawberry varieties. We've been growing Chandler for 35 years, Camarosa for over 30 years. And so for the last 4 years, I don't know if you've ever heard Dr. Barclay Polin. He was a small fruit specialist at NC State, retired, and went to work as a consultant with Lassen Canyon Nursery in California. And our industry was built on California varieties. But they've never wanted to share between NC State and UC Davis, or the private nurseries never wanted to to share information about varieties they were developing. But when Barkley went to Lassen, that opened the door we're testing hundreds of their advanced breeder lines, looking for varieties that work here on the East Coast, something I've wanted to do for 30 years, and finally able to do it. This will be our 5th year doing it. And this is just an example of some of they believe in size in California. And this is just we threw this variety out. It didn't taste good. but that's just an example. And all those buckets are different varieties. Then we'll pick them every 3 to 4 days. We'll pick them and then we'll grade them, size, yield, and taste. But that's one of the biggest ones I've seen, like the size of an apple. That's a 76 gram strawberry. Threw it out too. but like I say, it's such an advanced breeding program that finally, and we picked 2 out of the last 4 years. We've gone through hundreds of them. We picked 2 out that we've upped. It's a 54 and a 35. The 54 tastes better than Camarosa and holds very well and yields high yields. So we put 35 around our test. We've got it's about a third of an acre of all the 20 plant plots of different advanced breeder lines. And we surrounded this plot with about 3,500 of the 54 and about 3,000 of the 35. The 35 is sweeter than Ruby June. It won't yield, and it's hard to tell from a 20 plant plot, but now that we've got the 3,000 of each, I see that the 35 doesn't have the vigor that the 54. Tells me that we need to plant it earlier to get the yields up. But the 35, I call it sugar cane. I mean, you put a bucket on the table and every time you go buy it, you're gonna get one. It's that good. And we didn't want to lose that genetics. And so now that we've seen it, we want to work with it, see if we can't get the yields up. And it holds good, big, 18 to 20 gram average size, fruit size, and sweet. Like I say, I call it sugar cane. But like I say, California believes inside. That's the Albion that we're picking now. Just a picture of it, what it looks like. Like I say, most of those plants have 90% of them got flowering and fruiting like they should. Yeah, good tight bed. That's what you got. You want good tight plastic, good formed bed. Before we lay, we'll pre-bed, and we lay 3 beds at a time, three rows at a time. But we'll go through and we'll bed it up. Then we run the bed shaper over it the first time, and then we come back with the bed shaper that second time and lay the plastic, gas and lay the plastic. So but a good, tight, firm bed, domed on so that water runs off.
What size is this bed?
8 inch.
How wide on top?
They're about 34 inches across the top and 5 foot between the beds. I mean, that's the size of and as we pick, we're pulling those runners off. It does want to run.
What do you spray for spider mite?
3 materials that we depend on. Oberon. Oberon's got a 3-day PHI on it. I use that early if I need it. And then Canomite and Acromite are the other 2. They just got a 1-day PHI. And all 3 of those materials are effective on all 3 stages, adults, nymphs, and eggs. And those are 3, Oberon, Canomite, and Acromite are the 3 materials we depend on. And you got to rotate them because they will get Acromite. When Acromite first came out, it was a deal, and it was overused and got resistance. So you want to rotate those miticides around.
Does Ruby June taste better than a Sweet Charlie?
Yes. And it's just about as early as Sweet Charlie. Sweet Charlie is Ruby June in our area is going to replace Chandler and Sweet Charlie. It's better it tastes better. We rate it much better than Chandler taste-wise. Good shelf life, it'll hold better than Camarosa. And the fruit size is consistent. It stays good, like I say, 18 to 21 gram fruit. Sweet Charlie won't be more than a couple of days earlier, and it yields so much better. Sweet Charlie, it won't yield. It yields, then it falls off, and then might come back. The only place I never recommend more than 10% of your acreage just to get you started early with Sweet Charlie. But I think Ruby June's going to replace that. It's just about as early and much higher yielding. I say we grow some Fronteras for the shippers. It's a shipper. It's not what I'd call a roadside variety because it doesn't taste. I think a Camarosa tastes better than a Fronteras. Fronteras are big and pretty.
And flavor, you're saying it's the you don't have the sauce instead of calcium nitrate.
Well, we use calcium nitrate too. I mean, like I say, the 408 is a combination of 13045 potassium nitrate and calcium nitrate. We get our potassium with the 13045, and then we only about half our nitrogen needs, and we make that up with the calcium nitrate. Now, pre-plant fertilizer, I like if I'm say a 6618. You know, in general, I'd recommend 1,000 pounds of 6618 give you 60 pounds of nitrogen, 180 pounds of potassium, which our sandy soils, we need higher potassium. Don't know what you need, but if you didn't use 500 pounds of 6618 give you 30 pounds of nitrogen, make up the other 30 with calcium nitrate. But they're constantly fed calcium nitrate with that 408. But it's the Epsom salt, the sulfur, that it really helps to flavor. I always thought it was a magnesium, but it turns out it's a sulfur.
And you're injecting that, you're not doing foliar spray.
You can, using 2 to 4 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved in 100 gallons of water, make a foliar, but we just inject it. We're using 408, yeah. And 20-20-20 is good. The biggest problem with using phosphate through your trickle lines is if you've got white pipe, you'll get some daylight shining through that white pipe, and it tends to promote algae. The phosphorus does. So we put all our phosphorus out ahead of time before we lay the plastic. Like I say, most of our soils, they don't call for any phosphorus, but I still put 30-40 pounds of phosphorus just because it's growing in cold soils, and that available phosphorus helps. But phosphorus through the trickle line, like I say, if you got white pipe and you're using 20-20, if you got white pipe, paint it black. He's talking about the growth stages but that's an open flower. You see the open flower, then you got the popcorn you see the white of the petals. It's called a popcorn before the petals come open. And then in dormancy period, the buds are inside the crown. The flower buds, this time of year, the flower buds are inside that crown. As the crown forms, it forms those primordial flower buds inside the crown. So those flower buds are in that crown already. And then the transition period, when they start growing, 1st of March in our area, last February, 1st of March, you got the tight buds. They're still inside the crown. And then when the new leaves start coming out, the buds are still inside the crown. And of course, it's got these hardy and then as the buds emerge, the flower comes out, but it hadn't opened. Then you get the popcorn and the season early buds. So it goes, like I say, dormancy period, late December, January, February, the buds are inside the crown. The transition period, as it starts warming up in late February, 1st of March, the buds are still tight and the flower still in the crown. It's hardy to the mid-teens. And this time of year it's hardy down to 10. But these numbers you got to understand that warm 2 or 3 weeks of good, unusually warm weather will decondition these buds. And so this hardy to 10, I would say it all depends. It depends on the weather you get before, because you get 3 or 4 weeks of say 60, 70 degrees in say December, January, and it goes to 10. Those buds are not as hardy going into that sudden cold. But if it's a normal winter and they're hardening off, I would agree with his temperatures here. But a lot of it depends on the 2 or 3 weeks preceding that cold event as far as how hardy those flower buds are. And in a new leaf stage, like I say, when you get into late February, 1st of March, they start to grow, hardy to the upper teens, and if it's normal. But like I say, if it's deconditioned by 2 or 3 weeks of 60, 70 degrees, hitting on 80 in our area sometimes in February, early March, and then you get that upper teens, I'd have them covered. I'd have them covered. And then when the buds emerge, they're not open, but the flower buds emerge down to 20 to 25, it's critical temperature. And then the popcorns, when the petals aren't open, but you can see the white, to open blossoms can be hardy down to 27, 28 degrees. And and we talked about the dew point. That dew point, like I say, with a dry air, it can, if say the dew point is 10 degrees, that means you won't have any dew formation until you hit 10 degrees. Well, if the dew point is 28, and you hit 28, you're gonna get frost and it'll kill the fire out of them. So, but that's why you've got that low dew point, because say with a low dew point, say a dew point of 10 degrees, you can go to 28 and not get frost. But if you got a dew point of 28 or 30, and you hit the 27 or 28, that's when you get frost and it'll fry them. So the dew point is important when you're talking about the hardiness of these flower buds. Well, if I had open blooms and fruit out there, I would double cover if I was going to get in the low 20s for sure. I'm figuring 10 degrees of protection. Double covered, maybe even 12 degrees. You get that little insulation factor with the double cover. That little airspace between the cover, although they're laying on one another, still a little airspace in there that traps more heat. And
on real humid
No.
nights, what we are seeing with single covers, with some of the covers, where that cover touches that bloom, it's burning.
Yes.
On humid nights, if that cover is touching that open bloom, a full bloom, you'll get that bloom burned. So y'all understand that if you lose 10 to 15% of your crop with those early blooms, you've lost a lot of your profit.
You can pay for that second cover. With road siding, if you got berries left over at the end of the day, never drop that temperature below 55. 60 is even safer. If you drop below 55, when you pull them out the next day, you're going to get condensation, and those berries are going to get wet, and they're not going to last long. By lunchtime, they'll be looking terrible. But if you keep it above 60 degrees overnight and bring them out, you won't get that condensation. Real important. Once you go below 55, you better keep it there.
Y'all give Whit a big hand.
Well, thank you. I enjoy being in a beautiful country up here. I'm a flatlander. I like the hills.